for a very interesting encounter between Aronian and Kramnik from their match in Zurich, which produced some of the most interesting games, I think, of 2012, perhaps because it was a friendly match. But Aronian played against Kramnik's Berlin defense, and ultimately the structure arose with black taking on d4 and white recapturing with a piece. So after the Berlin, Aronian picked this slow system with d3. And now after knight e7, elsewhere we'll see Caruana picking d4 in this position against Kramnik, but here Aronian went for h3. Rook e1, c6, bishop a4, rook e8, d4, bishop b6, h6, a4, bishop e6, and knight f1. And here Kramnik took an interesting decision to try to open the play, because black is ahead in development. He has developed all of his minor pieces, has a good stake in the center. White has yet to develop his bishop on c1, and that struggles slightly for a good square. And so e takes d4 was an interesting response. And already after Aronian's reply, we get a very original position. C takes d4 would have been more standard, you would have thought, when black can play bishop a5, trade bishops, and then bring his queen to b6, with perhaps some advantage for white in view of his strong pawn center. But Aronian decided to take with a knight and then play f4 to try to gain some kingside space. And Kramnik responded with an excellent pawn sacrifice. So d5 is very principled, e5 and knight e4. And now if white doesn't do anything, black will be able to consolidate that knight with f5. So Aronian is basically compelled to take, but here, unsurprisingly, he avoided rook takes e4, which would have left black with some very serious compensation in the form of his two bishops and his lead in development. So Igor Stoll, who produced a typically detailed analysis of this game, gives this line, which is very intuitive. f6 and white's position is quite difficult. So Aronian instead played this deflecting move, and aims instead to capture the e4 pawn in comfort, perhaps with a knight. And after bishop b6, king h2, that's what he's ready to do. But Kramnik played c5, knight f5, exchange on f5, exchange on d1, rook e8, and bishop e3. And now after rook d3, rook e1, Aronian is ready to collect this e-pawn after either knight d6 or possibly rook a4, whereupon he'll be left with a very mobile, active kingside majority, which can advance maybe even more effectively in the endgame than in the middle game, because white doesn't need to be so worried about the exposure of his own king. But Kramnik anticipated this with an excellent move f6, and he wants to maintain the e-pawn as a strong asset. So Aronian took. King f8, rook a4, so trying to keep the pressure on this pawn, which for the moment still can't be supported with f5. Rook d5, c4, rook d3, and at b4 was probably an oversight by Aronian, because it allows this very strong exchange sacrifice by Kramnik. So rook takes e3 and c takes b4. And now this e-pawn is extremely strong. And actually, Kramnik maybe slightly overestimated its strength in that he pushed it straight away, whereas Stoll gives some detailed analysis to suggest that knight e7, just to limit the knight on h6, would have been extremely strong. So rook takes b4, bishop c7. And yeah, black has two pieces for a rook, and you would have thought excellent winning chances from here. Instead, e3 was a little bit more forcing, but now white was able to bail out into this endgame. And while white is a pawn up in the endgame, he has absolutely no advantage because the black b pawn is extremely strong and threatens to run. So Aronian took the very sensible decision to force a draw with rook b5 check. Clearly, king takes, knight d6 check would be something of a disaster. So instead the king came back to c6, but now after knight d4 check, king c7, rook c5 check, there's nothing there for black, because if he goes to b7, rook b5 check draws, and after d7 white has rook a5. So in many respects quite a non-standard game, quite typical actually of the match in Zurich, which was very originally played by both players, but some interesting thematic content about the structures which arise when black takes on d4 and white recaptures with a piece.